South Africa has been famously referred to as the Rainbow Nation because it is made up of so many diverse cultures and religions, and they all contribute to forming part of the country's heritage, identity and culture. So heritage is broken up into two types. One, natural and cultural, with natural heritage, of course, being its environment and natural resources, and cultural heritage, on the other hand, being the sense of identity of a particular population or community of people. September is Heritage Month in South Africa, and this morning the focus will be on spirituality and African spirituality as an extension of our heritage. And joining us virtually to help us understand the plug-in points for these two to connect is Selina Velaphi, who is a traditional healer, author and public speaker. Very good morning to you, Selina. Thanks for joining us. Welcome.
Good morning, Simpiwe. Thank you for having me, and good morning to your viewers at home.
It's an absolute pleasure, Selina. You know, I've read your book, aptly titled Beautifully Broken, which touches on brokenness and healing. And I assure those who haven't read it yet that they will go through different feelings all at once. They will laugh, they will cry, they will laugh again, they will be inspired, they will feel pity and so on. So just take us through your journey as a spiritual and traditional healer leading to you being an author.
Okay, just to add one more to the title, I'm also a high school teacher, Simpiwe.
Right.
About my book, so it's my first book. I have written 3. Mm-hmm. It's basically about my life story because obviously I'm a modern woman who grew up in the township, not really understanding much about who I was as an African. About my culture and my heritage. And when I found out that I have a calling to be a traditional healer, it really threw me off because I did not know much about the rite of passage that I'm to have done as a closer person. So for me, writing the book was about telling my story, but also showing another child out there that this thing is not demonic. This thing is not evil, because obviously there's the stigma around traditional healing. Basically the book about that, how I grew up, how I found out, and some of the things that would help another person who found themselves in a situation where they are told that they have an ancestral calling.
Yeah, we will talk about the stigma in traditional healing in just a moment. But I was quite intrigued by the questions you posed in one of the chapters about your calling, where you said that you were angry at these ancestors who tortured your soul and made your life difficult. In fact, you asked a very pertinent question, and I quote you verbatim. You said that if these ancestors are my great-grandparents or grandparents or past loved ones, why were they so cruel? Why would they watch and allow their loved one to be abused and treated so badly while they watched if they're supposed to be powerful and mighty? Where is God in this equation? Does this mean that ancestors are more powerful than God, since my prayers never seemed to go unanswered when it came to my tortured soul? Now, these are a very valid question, Selina. Were you able to find the answers? What about the debate around the juxtaposition between God and the ancestors and spirituality versus Christianity?
Yes. To answer the question, yes, I did get the answers to that. But let me just take it back. I've been conditioned in a very Western concept. And with that, there was the stigma that anything that had to do with traditional healing is evil. And it has nothing to do with God, basically. So when I found out, I thought, no, man, but I know my heart, I know I'm a good person, and I know I love God. So how can I have an ancestral calling that is associated with things that are deemed evil? And then obviously when I accepted my calling, because it was painful, so the things that were happening. So to answer the second part about the pain, my answer would be, for you to be able to get up and seek answers, you have to feel pain. So obviously, you know, Simpiwe, if you're comfortable and you're living a soft life, I mean, everything is flowing, you have no reason to go and seek answers about what is happening in your life. So I understood that that pain was just a message for me to get what it is that I needed to do. Because for me to be a messenger, when you are coming to me as Simpiwe with your pain, I must be able to identify, I must be able to have empathy. So as I accepted my calling, I understood that, for example, one of the things for me that was required for my journey is to have faith, because you have to believe in something that you don't see. Again, when I'm talking about a Western concept of understanding things, when you go to school, you understand that you have a curriculum that at the end of my schooling, this is what I'm going to get. And in African spirituality, you just have to trust that if you go umema kantini, meaning in your kraal, and you talk to your ancestors and ask for something, you must just trust that it is going to happen.
Yeah.
So for me, I don't see that much difference between Christianity and African spirituality. It's just that with African spirituality, our understanding of God, which we call Amata, is through understanding your rite of passage as an African child, but it's basically the same thing. But another person calls it Jesus, but another person is talking to their ancestors, but we all believe in God.
And I quite like how you underscored the importance of trust for both belief systems, both in African spirituality and in Christianity. So let's talk about some of the misconceptions people have had about traditional healing and African spirituality. Perhaps we could do this from the vantage point of access to both belief systems. For instance, if you want to pray to God, you simply, sometimes you don't even have to close your eyes. Sometimes you don't even have to say the word because God sees the heart. But if you want to speak to your ancestors, well, I'm told you have to light up impepo, you have to slaughter an animal, which leads to some people demonizing it over Christianity, isn't it?
Okay. So let's make an example about church, for example.
Yeah.
A person would go to church because you are going there to meet with like-minded people, and then you are worshiping God. And we all worship God, by the way, because that's another thing. People would believe that we worship ancestors. But with African spirituality, the person goes to Emakantini, which is the crowd, because we believe that that is where your ancestors reside. And that is where you would go and talk about what the issues that you have.
Yeah.
And the example that you mentioned about slaughtering an animal, we don't just slaughter animals just for the sake of it. Slaughtering, and I'm going to reference to the Xhosa culture because I'm Xhosa. When we are slaughtering, we understand it as a sacred thing. So we don't just do it. First of all, a home must be open. So when we're saying a housewarming, we're not talking the Western housewarming, but when you're slaughtering, you're pouring blood in your ancestral land so that whichever animals that you slaughter going forward, your ancestors understand why you're doing it. So you wouldn't just slaughter just for the sake of it.
Okay.
And you'll find that another thing, people would say, there's no way that an animal will not scream when you're slaughtering. It does happen that it doesn't, because the ancestors that you are slaughtering for have to agree to say that we are agreeing by the animal screaming that we are accepting the ritual that you are doing.
Really?
So other examples, for example, which for me are similar. There are certain areas that we go to where we feel the presence of God and the presence of ancestors. Like if you go to a river, or you go to a mountain, or you go to the sea or the waterfall. Christianity, we do the same. African spirituality, we do the same. The only difference is that you are going to get there and you say, God of my ancestors, and then another person will say, God of Israel, or God of Abraham, or God of... So I'm going to say God of my clan, Nkane, Zangwe, Gwashu, Chawe, Nyele, Statu, and all of that. So those are some of the examples, but many.
Right, right. And Selina, you speak of your depression episodes being a sign that you were not walking to the drumbeat of your true self. Well, that's, of course, before you responded to your calling. Whether your ancestral calling was the panacea of your depression, you tell us that. But holistically speaking, how does African spirituality address issues of mental and emotional well-being?
Okay, so no, I don't normally like using the word traditional healing because I feel that what we do is not just about taking umuthi, a traditional herb, and help and heal someone. It's a very holistic thing because you have to look at the person's mental state. You have to look at the person's emotionally, physically. So it's a whole lot of things. And also if their lineage or ancestry is also healthy. I'm not taking away Simpiwe from the fact that, yes, there is mental illnesses. Definitely, there is that. But I found that the symptoms are very similar. For example, when you're mentioning the part where I talk about dancing to the beat of the drum,
Yes,
I
yes.
used to find that I would have, if you were looking at me from the Western lenses, you would say that I have anxiety. And because our ancestors speak to us, I would feel that I needed to jump. So at the time, I would think that I needed to dance or I needed to exercise. And then I would feel that there's a difference. Only to realize that I needed to do a traditional dance, which we call ukuxhensa.
Wow.
Because the minute you do, and your feet, remember, we're always walking
Oh,
barefoot,
okay.
and my feet are stomping the floor, then there's a relief here. So you'll find that the symptoms are very similar,
All
where
right. Selina,
emotionally, your emotions are.
unfortunately, we're out of time, but you've got two other books, so we might just invite you in studio to talk about some of the other two books that you've written. But thank you so much for sharing your thoughts and broadening
I
our
really
understanding
appreciate.
of African spirituality with us. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Simpiwe. Much appreciated.
Thank
Thank you
you.
for having me.
Well, that was Selina Velaphi, a traditional healer, spiritual healer, author, and motivational speaker, chatting to us about African spirituality as an extension of South Africa's heritage.